Today we are moving on to our evaluation of the death penalty. So now that you have completed your pre-test, we are going to learn more about the death penalty's background and its use in the present-day United States. So our first objective today is to identify the historical roots of the death penalty. And our second objective is to compare the current status of the death penalty in the United States, including the number of states that use it, the number of states that have abolished it, and the use of moratoriums. And remember to answer your checkpoint questions as we go. Here is your first checkpoint question. What do you know about the death penalty? It is okay if you're unsure, so just say what you know or what you hear about it, and what do you want to learn about the death penalty? Moving on to our background information, we will find that the death penalty, or capital punishment as it is sometimes called, can be traced back to the earliest records of human history. We know from our discussions of due process and the court system that many American laws are based on the English legal system, and this is no different. The English also used the death penalty, and so did the American colonies. An example of the death penalty in the colonies was New Haven's criminal codes of 1642 and 1650. In these codes, the colony mandated the use of the death penalty in murder, treason, theft, horse theft, and in cases where a child strikes a parent. This brings us to our second checkpoint question. So after hearing the crimes punishable at death in the New Haven colony, what are your thoughts? Do you think it is a suitable punishment for the crimes listed above, or is it too harsh? Now, in the present day, not every state uses the death penalty. In fact, it is almost a 50-50 split in the United States. 24 states use the death penalty, or those in green on the map. 23 states have abolished the death penalty, those in blue, and 3 others have a moratorium in place. Those states are in orange. Remember, a moratorium means that the governor has paused the use of the death penalty. So inmates that are on death row are not being executed. They are not trying to add any new inmates to death row, but it is not fully abolished yet. So that takes us to checkpoint number 3. What trends do you see on this map? Is there anything on this map that surprised you? Finally, for the states that still use the death penalty, the primary means is via lethal injection. However, some states allow for electrocution or a firing squad. As a reminder, the firing squad is when several officers shoot at the target at once, but only one has a live round and all the other officers have blanks. So they are unsure of who actually fired the round that executed the inmate. But now we have to ask ourselves for our final checkpoint question is, the Eighth Amendment protects citizens from cruel and unusual punishment, but many states still use the death penalty. In your opinion, is there a humane way to carry out the death penalty, knowing what you know about the primary means of execution? So to conclude our overview, our summary of the death penalty is as follows. 1, the death penalty has been used throughout history. It is primarily used for serious crimes such as murder and treason. Slightly less than half of the United States uses it today in 2023, and when it is used, the primary method is lethal injection. So please keep all of this in mind and be prepared to discuss your responses at the start of class. We will start their discussion and then move on to the arguments for and against the death penalty's use. And now I just wanted to go over some of the sample scenarios similar to the ones you saw in your pretest. So now we are going to look at some more sample scenarios similar to the ones you saw in your pretest. So we're going to hear the crimes that were allegedly committed by these defendants, and then we're going to have to look at some key clues to determine if they qualify for the death penalty. So to start, defendant number 1 has a long list of previous crimes, but they are mostly misdemeanors. So less serious crimes. They are now charged with the murder of a gas station attendant while robbing the gas station and set it aflame. Could they qualify for the death penalty? So the first thing to look at is that they do have a previous criminal background, although they were not necessarily the most serious of crimes. they do have a proclivity for crime. And the key thing is that they have now committed 3 felonies in one fell swoop. They murdered the gas station attendant after they had robbed the gas station and then set it aflame, so arson. So after committing these 3 felonies at once, could they qualify for the death penalty? In most states that still have the death penalty in 2023, the answer is yes. Now, just because they qualify for it does not mean that the prosecution will seek the death penalty, but he could be a contender for it because of the severity of this pre-planned crime with the robbery, the arson, and the murder, and the previous criminal record. Now, moving on to defendant number 2, a little bit of a different scenario. They have no previous criminal record, but was convicted in the murder of an on-duty fireman. Now, when we say on-duty, we mean they were actively working. So they would be identified as a fireman through their uniforms, the vehicles, and the actions they are doing. Could they qualify for the death penalty? Now, this one's a little tricky because you would likely be inclined to say no, because they have no previous criminal record. However, in most states, if you murder a peace officer, so a police officer on a traffic stop, or a fireman, and there have been some bills proposed to include EMTs, you can automatically qualify for the death penalty. So most likely, defendant number 2 would also qualify for the death penalty, even though they have no previous criminal record. And this is something that we'll talk a little more in depth about when we talk about the pros and cons of the death penalty and how it is implemented, because this is one of the things many opponents cite in their discussion of the ethics of it.